25 German naval officers, their hands blackened with desert dirt, crawled through absolute darkness. For 3 months, they had clogged through 178 feet of Arizona clay with stolen kitchen knives, makeshift shovels fashioned from bed slats, and their bare hands. The tunnel, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, stretched from beneath Compound 1A's bathhouse toward what German U-boat captain Jürgen Wattenberg believed was the Gila River, their liquid highway to freedom and Mexico, just 150 miles south. Behind them, 3,000 German prisoners slept in neat barracks rows. Above them, American guards patrolled with rifles, completely unaware that the greatest prisoner escape in United States history was unfolding beneath their boots. Captain Wattenberg, formerly of U-162, had studied smuggled maps for weeks. He had calculated distances, planned supply routes, and convinced 24 elite submarine officers that escape was not just possible, it was their duty under the German military code. But Wattenberg had made one catastrophic error, an error so fundamental, so devastating, that it would transform their audacious breakout into a legend of miscalculation that haunts military escape history to this day. The hunters become the hunted. Jürgen Wattenberg was no ordinary prisoner. Before his capture in September 1942, he had commanded U-162 through the treacherous waters of the Caribbean, sinking Allied vessels with calculated precision. Tall, aristocratic, and fiercely loyal to Nazi ideology, the 38-year-old captain lieutenant carried himself with the bearing of a man who refused to accept defeat. When British destroyers depth-charged his submarine off Trinidad, forcing him and his crew to surface and surrender, Wattenberg considered it a temporary setback, not an ending. The Americans transported him first to a POW facility in Florida, then to Nebraska's Camp Concordia, before finally settling him at Papago Park in March 1944. The camp, located in the Phoenix Desert alongside the normally dry salt riverbed, housed approximately 3,000 German prisoners with Compound 1A reserved specifically for the most dangerous and highest-ranking naval officers. These were U-boat commanders and crew, the elite wolves of Hitler's undersea fleet, who had terrorized Atlantic convoys and sent hundreds of thousands of tons of Allied shipping to the ocean floor. Papago Park seemed almost absurdly casual to Wattenberg. The camp consisted of simple wooden barracks surrounded by a single barbed wire fence, with guard towers spaced at regular intervals. The American philosophy toward POWs, governed by the Geneva Convention and a calculated policy of humane treatment, stood in contrast to the brutal conditions in German and Japanese camps. Prisoners received 3 substantial meals daily, could purchase cigarettes and candy at the canteen with tokens earned from work details, and even organized soccer leagues and theatrical performances. But for Wattenberg and his inner circle of true believers, comfort was irrelevant. On March 16, 1944, just days after arriving at Papago Park, he convened a secret meeting with 7 other U-boat commanders, Captain Fritz Guggenberger of U-81, who had torpedoed the British aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal, Captain August Maus of U-183, and 5 others who shared Wattenberg's iron commitment to the Nazi cause. Their conclusion was unanimous. Escape was not optional. It was their sworn obligation under German military law. The plan takes shape. Throughout spring and summer of 1944, Wattenberg's conspiracy grew. He recruited carefully, selecting only officers he deemed ideologically pure and physically capable of the grueling journey to Mexico. By September, 25 men had sworn themselves to the plan. They included some of the Kriegsmarine's most decorated commanders, men who had collectively sunk over 200,000 tons of Allied shipping and survived dozens of depth charge attacks. The escape strategy was elegant in its simplicity. They would tunnel from the bathhouse in Compound 1A beneath the fence, emerging, Wattenberg calculated, directly at the banks of the Gila River, which American guards had casually mentioned in conversation. Once at the river, they would construct makeshift rafts and float downstream, traveling by night toward Mexico. Wattenberg had obtained a Texaco road map smuggled into camp by a German sympathizer working at a nearby labor detail, which clearly showed the Gila River running past the camp's northern boundary. The mathematics seemed sound. The fence stood approximately 178 feet from the bathhouse. The tunnel needed to extend perhaps 200 feet to ensure they surfaced well beyond the patrol routes. At roughly 6 feet per week, accounting for the hardness of desert clay and the need for absolute secrecy, they estimated completion by mid-December, perfectly timed for the chaos and reduced vigilance of the Christmas season. Beginning September 14, 1944, the actual digging commenced. They worked exclusively at night, during the hours between final bed check at 9:30 p.m. and morning roll call at 6 a.m. The entrance was concealed under a drain cover in the bathhouse floor, requiring 4 men to lift. A rotating crew of 3 diggers worked in shifts, 1 man at the tunnel face, excavating, 1 passing dirt-filled coal scuttles backward, and 1 at the entrance, disposing of the evidence. The disposal of excavated dirt presented the operation's greatest challenge. Over 3 months, they removed an estimated 14 tons of clay and soil. The solution was ingenious. They packed dirt into the pockets of their trousers, sealed with safety pins, then casually walked the compound during daylight hours, releasing small amounts through holes cut in the pocket bottoms. Other loads were mixed into the bathhouse garden beds, carefully distributed so the discoloration wouldn't be noticed. Tunneling through hell. The physical conditions inside the tunnel tested even these hardened submarine veterans. The shaft measured just 24 inches wide and 18 inches high, dimensions that forced the lead digger to lie flat, excavating the clay face with a stolen kitchen knife, while breathing air that grew progressively thinner as the tunnel extended. Every 10 feet, they installed makeshift supports using wooden bed slats, though cave-ins remained a constant terror. On October 8, 1944, disaster nearly struck. Lieutenant Zor C. Wolfgang Klarus was digging at the 87-foot mark when the ceiling collapsed, burying him under several hundred pounds of clay. For 7 desperate minutes, his fellow conspirators clawed at the debris while precious seconds ticked away. They extracted him unconscious but alive. Wattenberg ordered a 48-hour suspension while they reinforced the entire tunnel with additional supports. Clarus, after recovering, insisted on returning to digging rotation. The tunnel's air quality deteriorated dangerously beyond 100 feet. To solve this, they fashioned a ventilation system from stolen coffee cans soldered together, creating a primitive air duct that ran the tunnel's length. A hand-operated bellows, constructed from a leather coat and wooden frame, pushed fresh air through the duct. Without this innovation, the diggers would have suffocated before reaching 150 feet. By December 1, 1944, they had reached 165 feet. Wattenberg calculated they needed just 2 more weeks. The Christmas escape was on schedule. The conspirators began assembling their escape supplies: stolen compasses, hoarded chocolate bars and crackers, canteens filled from the bathhouse taps, and civilian clothes painstakingly sewn from dyed undershirts and trousers. Several men had grown beards to disguise their military appearance. Captain Guggenberger kept a secret diary of the operation, written in microscopic script on toilet paper, and hidden inside a hollowed-out chess piece. His entry from December 10th reads, 175 feet completed. Perhaps 5 more days of digging. The men are exhausted, but determined. Wattenberg remains confident about the river. I have private doubts about the maps, but to voice them now would destroy morale. We are committed. The breakout. December 23rd arrived with perfect conditions. A cold front had moved through Phoenix, dropping temperatures into the low 40s, ideal for night travel through the desert. The camp's American command had granted extended Christmas privileges, including a special showing of a German film and extra canteen hours, which meant guards were distracted and prisoners had legitimate reasons to be moving between barracks after dark. At 9 p.m., the 25 escapees gathered casually in the bathhouse for what appeared to be evening ablutions. Each man carried a small bundle containing his escape supplies. Wattenberg conducted a final inspection, ensuring every man understood the post-tunnel plan. Move quickly to the river, stay in pairs, construct rafts from driftwood, and float downstream for 3 nights before attempting to cross the Mexican border near Nogales. At 9:47 p.m., they lifted the drain cover and began their descent. The lead group, Wattenberg, Guggenberger, and Maus, crawled through first, covering the 178-foot distance in approximately 12 minutes of claustrophobic darkness. Behind them, the remaining 22 men followed at 2-minute intervals to prevent traffic jams in the narrow shaft. At 10:52 p.m., Wattenberg's hands broke through the final clay barrier. Cool desert air rushed into the tunnel. He pulled himself through the exit hole, scrambled to his feet, and looked around for the Gila River, their salvation, their highway to freedom. He saw only desert. Empty, vast, moonlit desert stretching in every direction. No river, no water, not even a dry riverbed. The Gila River, he would later learn, lay more than 8 miles west of Papago Park. His Texaco map had been hopelessly outdated, showing irrigation canals and seasonal waterways that had been rerouted decades earlier. The casual conversations with guards about the river had referred to the Salt River, which in December 1944 was completely dry, a sandy wash that held water only during Arizona's brief monsoon season. Wattenberg stood frozen as his 24 comrades emerged from the tunnel behind him, each man experiencing the same crushing realization. They were 8 miles from the nearest water, in winter desert, with perhaps enough supplies for 3 days. The temperature would drop to near freezing by dawn. They had no rafts, no river route, and no realistic way to travel 150 miles through Arizona desert and mountains to reach Mexico. But turning back meant certain punishment, likely transfer to maximum security camps. Some of the men, particularly the younger officers, advocated attempting the overland journey despite the odds. Wattenberg made the decision. They would scatter into the desert, seek what water they could find, and attempt to reach Mexico on foot. It was suicide disguised as strategy, but it was all they had left. The Great Manhunt. At 6:15 a.m. on December 24th, during morning roll call, camp guards discovered 25 German officers missing from Compound 1A. Initial confusion gave way to shock as they found the tunnel entrance beneath the bathhouse drain. Lieutenant Colonel William A. Holden, Papago Park's commanding officer, immediately contacted FBI field offices across Arizona, New Mexico, and California. By 7:30 a.m., roadblocks had been established on every highway south of Phoenix. The FBI deployed 150 special agents to coordinate the search. The Arizona Highway Patrol mobilized every available officer. Local sheriff's departments, Phoenix City Police, and even civilian volunteer posses joined the manhunt. By noon on December 24th, more than 250 law enforcement personnel and 500 civilian volunteers were combing the desert, checking freight trains, and monitoring border crossings. For the escaped Germans, the reality of their situation became apparent within hours. The desert, beautiful and lethal, offered no shelter, no water, and no mercy. Several men attempted to hide in irrigation ditches, only to find them dry. Others tried to steal from isolated farmhouses but were spotted by vigilant residents. The lack of water became critical by midday on December 24th, as temperatures climbed into the 60s under intense desert sun. The first capture occurred at 2:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Two German officers, severely dehydrated and disoriented, flagged down a motorist on Highway 60 begging for water. The driver, recognizing them as likely escapees from radio reports, drove them directly to the nearest sheriff's station. By nightfall on December 24th, 8 more had been captured, most within a 15-mile radius of Papago Park. Captain Guggenberger and another officer managed to board a freight train heading east, hiding in an empty boxcar. They rode for nearly 60 miles before railroad workers discovered them during a routine inspection stop in Florence, Arizona, on December 26, 1944. They surrendered without resistance, grateful for the bottles of water their captors provided. The most determined holdouts were Wattenberg himself and Captain Mouse. They had struck out northwest, avoiding roads and traveling only at night, subsisting on cactus fruit and morning dew, licked from rocks. On December 28, 1944, a rancher discovered them hiding in his barn near Buckeye, Arizona, approximately 35 miles from Papago Park. They were emaciated, sunburned, and suffering from exposure. Wattenberg's feet were badly blistered, and he could barely walk. The final escapee, a young lieutenant named Reinhold, managed to evade capture until January 28, 1945, an astonishing 36 days after the breakout. He had survived by breaking into summer cabins in the mountains north of Phoenix, stealing food and water, and constantly moving. When finally cornered by FBI agents near Prescott, Arizona, he was 25 pounds lighter, but defiantly proud of his endurance record. Aftermath and consequences. The event surrounding the recapture of all 25 escapees was considered a major success for American law enforcement, though it exposed serious security gaps at Papago Park. Colonel Holden faced a formal inquiry but was ultimately exonerated, as the Geneva Convention mandated relatively lenient POW camp conditions. The bathhouse was demolished, and the tunnel, which became something of a tourist attraction for base personnel, was filled with concrete. For the German officers, punishment was remarkably light by wartime standards. They spent 30 days in solitary confinement, then were transferred to maximum security camps in other states. Wattenberg went to Camp Clinton, Mississippi, where he remained until his repatriation to Germany in March 1946. Under the Geneva Convention, attempting escape was not considered a crime, but rather a military duty, so the Americans could not impose harsh sentences. The psychological impact on the escapees varied dramatically. Several, including Captain Guggenberger, later admitted feeling foolish for believing they could survive the Arizona desert with minimal preparation. Guggenberger's diary entry from February 1945, written after his transfer to a Louisiana camp, reflects bitter hindsight. "We were submarine commanders, masters of a steel world beneath the ocean. We knew nothing of deserts, of American geography, of the real distances involved. Wattenberg's confidence blinded us all. I should have trusted my doubts." Wattenberg himself never publicly expressed regret. When interviewed by American intelligence officers in January 1945, he stated simply, "We did our duty as German officers. That the plan failed does not diminish the obligation to have made the attempt." He returned to Germany and lived quietly in Hamburg until his death in 1972, rarely speaking about the Papago Park episode. The escape revealed fascinating details about POW camp life in America. The 3,000 prisoners at Papago Park had collectively enjoyed better nutrition and medical care than most American civilians during rationing. They had access to dentists, doctors, and even psychiatric counselors. The camp library contained over 4,000 books in German. Prisoners could earn up to 80 cents per day working at agricultural labor details, which they spent on luxury items at the canteen. This relatively comfortable existence created a strange cognitive dissonance for many POWs. Letters from Germany described starvation, bombing raids, and societal collapse, while they lived in heated barracks, ate 3 meals daily, and played volleyball. Some historians argue this actually strengthened Nazi loyalty among hardcore believers like Wattenberg. They couldn't reconcile American generosity with the propaganda portrayal of Americans as barbaric enemies, so they dismissed it as weakness. The final count. The statistics of the Great Papago Park escape are staggering. 178 feet of tunnel dug with primitive tools over 100 days. 25 men escaped. 14 tons of dirt removed and concealed. Approximately 1,200 man-hours of digging labor. Captured within 36 days. 0 casualties during either the escape or recapture. And a manhunt involving over 750 law enforcement and civilian personnel at peak deployment. The escape cost American taxpayers an estimated $25,000 in 1944 dollars, approximately $400,000 today, when accounting for law enforcement overtime, vehicle fuel, and investigation expenses. Yet it produced no political scandal and barely registered in national newspapers, as media attention remained focused on the Battle of the Bulge, which was raging in Europe during the same period. Perhaps most remarkably, the Papago Park breakout remained the largest POW escape on American soil throughout the entire war. Despite housing over 425,000 Axis prisoners in camps across the United States between 1942 and 1946, no other escape involved more than a dozen men, and none covered as much distance or evaded capture as long as young Lieutenant Reinhold's 36 days. The tunnel itself was rediscovered in 1988 during construction work at what had become Papago Park Military Reservation. Archaeologists excavated portions of it, finding remnants of the wooden supports, several stolen spoons used as digging implements, and fragments of the coffee can ventilation system. These artifacts are now displayed at the Phoenix Holocaust and Genocide Education Center, a somewhat ironic final resting place for tools of Nazi officers' escape attempt. Reflections on Duty and Delusion. The story of the Papago Park escape forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about duty, ideology, and the psychology of true believers. Wattenberg and his co-conspirators weren't cartoon villains. They were intelligent, highly trained military professionals. Yet their commitment to Nazi ideology blinded them to obvious logistical realities. The fact that not one of the 25 questioned Wattenberg's river calculations until they emerged from the tunnel speaks to the power of authoritarian leadership and groupthink, even among educated men. The escape also reveals the strange contradictions of World War II's POW system. These men had killed Allied sailors, sunk merchant vessels carrying food to Britain, and contributed directly to the Nazi war machine. Yet American guards treated them with a respect that bordered on deference, providing comfortable quarters and humane conditions. This wasn't weakness, it was strategic. The United States wanted Germany to reciprocate with good treatment of American POWs, though this bargain worked imperfectly at best. For the residents of Phoenix, the Christmas week of 1944 brought an unexpected wartime drama to their desert city. Newspapers warned citizens to be vigilant, creating brief panic before reassuring reports of rapid recaptures. Some locals treated the manhunt as entertainment, forming volunteer posses and searching the desert with more enthusiasm than skill. The entire episode highlighted how distant most Americans felt from the actual fighting. Even escaped enemy soldiers seemed more like a curiosity than a genuine threat. What haunts the story most is the absolute pointlessness of it all. By December 1944, Germany's defeat was inevitable. The Reich cities were being systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Eastern Front had collapsed. D-Day had opened a Western Front that was grinding toward the German heartland. Within 4 months, Hitler would be dead and Germany would surrender unconditionally. Had Wattenberg and his men simply waited, they would have been repatriated by late 1946 at the latest, healthy and alive. Instead, they risked death by exposure, wasted 3 months of their lives clawing through Arizona clay, and achieved absolutely nothing except creating a footnote in military escape history. The tunnel, their monument, led nowhere, not just geographically, but metaphorically. It was a tunnel dug by men who couldn't see that their cause was already buried, who couldn't accept that their war was lost, who chose the delusion of duty over the reality of their situation. That tunnel, more than any battlefield grave or monument, captures something essential about the true believers of the Third Reich. Their absolute commitment to ideology, even when it contradicted observable reality. Their willingness to sacrifice everything for a cause that was already ashes, and their inability to recognize that sometimes surrender isn't weakness, it's sanity.